They left no good fiancés. They set up businesses. They left jobs they hated. They bought camper vans. They left the country. And because
I love the way you said they bought camper vans. It's so random, but that's like whatever they do.
Whatever
it's like
your
explore
happiness
the world.
is.
Yeah,
Whatever your happiness is.
Because it isn't necessarily going off and having a high end career.
Not
or
at
doing
all.
That. It could be hire a camper van and go traveling around Europe or
That's
whatever.
it.
Yeah.
Unlock whatever it is that makes you feel fabulous. And I saw then this nugget of confidence becoming a catalyst for real change. And because we gave those women permission to love themselves where they stood, not to defer gratification, not to defer contentment, not to defer self-love to a point in time when something happened that would allow them to.
Sonya, it is a pleasure to have you. We bumped into each other randomly at a menopause event.
We did.
A few months ago. And then actually I got a number of DMs into my Instagram saying, get Sonya on the podcast. She's amazing for inspiring women. Aww. Because a couple of people were at a talk that you gave and I said, who is this Sonya Lennon? And then I realised we'd met. So here you are. Tell me your story.
Thanks for having me. Yeah. Gosh, where do I start?
Start with your dad and the fact that he was the first man to witness a birth.
So my family are from Dublin through and through, and for generations. But my dad was stationed up in Ballyshannon in Donegal, working for AIB. When my mum was pregnant with me, and I was born in Ballyshannon, and the hospital at the time was run by nuns, and my dad said he wanted to be at the birth, and the Mother Superior of the hospital was dumbfounded. She'd never come across anything like this in her life before, and she said, fine, if you want to be there, be there. And so my dad was the first man, certainly in Donegal, that we know of that went and attended a birth, and the nun was so impressed by him that she took him out for pints afterwards, which I think is the ultimate reward.
That is absolutely. That's a forward-thinking nun as well. That's
absolutely
great.
Yeah.
I actually had great experiences with nuns myself. I went to Muckross in Donnybrook, and the nuns all there were fantastic.
I went to Loretto on the Green, and there was a few nuns still teaching when I was there. And again, there was certainly Sister Anne Mary, the art teacher there, was a huge influence on me. And we had a fantastic relationship. So
I even had a nun. I remember the nun, Sister Rita. Oh, she was like, she used to rap her knuckles on the desk to get us to be quiet. But she was talking to us about periods affecting our well-being and affecting the way we could perform in exams for when we were doing our junior cert. And that was back in 1995, and she would have been in her 60s at that stage. And when I think back on it, how progressive that was to even speak about that, where isn't it mad?
Yeah, and I think it's funny. It always makes me think. We have these identifications for ourselves as humans, and a nun is an identification in the same way that, the colour of your skin is an identification, or your sexuality or whatever. But, we have to really force ourselves not to rely on our black and white assumptions or judgments, and to kind of paddle around in the grey a little bit and get to know people for who they are, not for how we identify them.
Yeah, or for bad stories about certain individuals in a particular group. No, you're right. But Sonya, how did you become the amazing woman that you are today? You founded a number of organisations, and you're very progressive thinking yourself. So how did this all start?
I suppose we talked about my dad and how forward thinking he was, and still is. I have to say, he you're going to love this. He said to me the other day, because I've started back running, he said, I'm going to download that Couch to 5K. He's nearly 85. I'm thinking of starting running.
But didn't he scuba dive recently? Did I read that?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, unbelievable. But anyway, so my mom worked all through my childhood. She was cabin crew for Aer Lingus, and she was tour guide. And I just always knew my mum as a working mum.
Yeah.
And her mantras were always have your running away money, And if you're not part of the revenue, you're not part of the decision making. And I suppose those two things just made such an impact on me, you know. And I think, and even the nuns that were in the school that I was in, they were so driven by us being self-actualizing. There was, you know, nobody was going to provide the solution to you. You had to be your own solution. And my mum absolutely, that was her modus. And it was about money as choice. Money gives you the opportunity to do things. So it was never about kind of have the money for the money's sake. It was about for the options that it afforded you. So I suppose when I left school, I thumbed my nose at third level. I didn't really want to do it. I'm a very practical person. I'm very kind of both feet in. So I decided I wanted to work. I'd already been working in retail during school, in various different stores. And I decided I just wanted to work. I wanted to earn money, wanted to learn on the job. I didn't want to learn theory. I wanted to learn by doing. And I think it's really interesting now that there's such a huge focus on apprenticeships, and particularly on driving women into apprenticeships. There's really a shortfall of women taking up apprenticeships. Well, you can become a doctor through an apprenticeship program now. I don't know if you knew that. No. Like, it's such an amazing way to create a pathway for educational attainment. And I just think we're slightly obsessed in this country by go to school, go to college, get your degree, get your master's. You know, it's so limiting in terms of how we can achieve what we want to achieve. And I suppose I'm the testament to that, because I didn't go to college. I went into retail. I loved retail. I loved selling. I love selling. Brendan's nickname for me is Money Belt. I love...
Who's Brendan?
Brendan Courtney, my business partner.
Yes.
Yeah. So he calls me Money Belt. And I love psychology. I love human behavior. I love watching people. I loved understanding how what people needed from an experience in that purchasing, how they interacted, the importance of trust. And I was selling very high end clothing at the time. If I sold a garment to a woman that didn't look good on her, that breached the trust that I had built with her. And she would have gone home and she would have said, this looks shit. I thought she had my back. Whereas I would frequently say, no, don't buy that. You can do better than that. There's another delivery coming in next week. Wait, you'll get something nicer. It's not right. And take the short-term hit to build long-term trust and lifetime value in a customer and human connection. And I think that's really been...
And you learnt this on the job, this psychology type of... Yeah.
Totally. In 7 years on the shop floor in retail, you get to understand what makes people tick.
Oh, you absolutely do. I know that from 20 years of pharmacy.
Totally. So I suppose, and then from that, you totally understand the value of human relationships. And I see that all the time. If you nurture the relationships that you value, there will be unexpected moments where they bear fruit. I've seen it so many times. And it's back to trust, it's respect, it's care, attention, kindness, all those things that are really fundamental to making lasting relationships with other humans. Like, that's what it's about at the end of the day. And that's where the good stuff happens. But of course, I'm getting absolutely sidetracked with my own thoughts here. But I went into retail, and it wasn't long before I got to see stylists at work coming in and out, borrowing clothes, creating visual pictures using clothes and models.
So what shops did you work in? Was it the likes of Brian Thomas and places like
that?
No,
funnily enough, now I did apply for Brian Thomas at one stage, but I got rejected. I was working in two kind of high-end boutiques, Camouflage on Dawson Street and Firenze in the Westbury, just beside the Westbury Hotel. And they were boutiques that were selling, you know, Yohji Yamamoto, Japanese designers.
Okay.
They were the first ones to bring in Dolce & Gabbana, all the Belgian designers, extraordinary international collections.
You just got into those retails as a young woman that was just interested in fashion, is that
So
it?
I started folding jumpers in Blarney Woolen Mills at the age of 17.
Okay.
And so I understood how to work a till, how to make a sale, how to merchandise, all that stuff. And in my lunch times, when I was working in Blarney Woolen Mills wearing my little uniform, I'd go and lick the windows of the really swanky boutiques and I'd be like, oh my God, these places are amazing. And Camouflage being the nearest one on Dawson Street. And before long, I got offered a job and then I moved from there. That unfortunately closed down. These stores were way ahead of their time, you know, like absolute firebrands of women who opened these stores and brought these amazing collections to Ireland before Ireland was ready, really.
Okay.
And then there was only a handful of fashion stylists working in Dublin, because we're going back to the dark ages now, Laura. Like really, we're talking late 80s, early 90s.
Okay.
And I saw these stylists coming in, getting these clothes, and then a month later I'd open Image magazine or Tatler or whatever, and I'd see the clothes that I'd helped them select in the pages of the magazine, and I was like, oh my, I'm part of that.
Yeah,
like
okay.
I've contributed to that. And of course it didn't take me long to realise that if I was getting so much joy from this, I should go and do it myself. So I spent 20 years as a fashion stylist, styling magazine shoots, fashion campaigns, music videos, TV commercials, all sorts of stuff, traveling all over the world, having a great time.
Wow. And did you meet loads of cool people? Dare I say it? Or not so cool people?
Did I meet loads of cool people? I met amazing people, and I worked with amazing people and had amazing experiences, you know, flying in private jets to music festivals and getting a limo hammered on by braying fans, and you know, and it was fun. Like, it was great fun. And I suppose fashion was always my first love, you know. But I had over that 20 years, again back to the relationship piece, I had built a beautiful stable of clients who came back to me time and time again, and we were all friends. We made great work together, and we loved it, and we were well paid. It was fantastic. And then I remember I had been a contributor to first of all Head to Toe, and then Off the Rails over the years, like a talking head, commenting on.
So funny when you say Off the Rails.
Oh my
it seems
God.
like so long ago. I remember watching that avidly.
You have to whisper it though. Off the Rails. And you know, there's people who still come up to me in the street and say, love your show, never miss it. I'm like, well, it's been off air since 2012, so I don't know if you've recorded it or but anyway, so I had been a fashion talking head, contributor, international collections, blah blah blah, and then they asked me would I do a makeover, basically, and they wanted to do a makeover on larger women to show fashion for a fuller figure. And I said, well, I don't do makeovers. I'm a high-end fashion designer. No, I'm not interested. And they said, no, we think you'd do a really good job and we'd really like to see it. And I kind of twisted it in my own head and said, well, I'm not going to do makeovers, but I will do a fashion story with fuller figured women, and it'll be really beautiful and very sexy and fabulous and a celebration of their curves.
Rather than, I suppose, a makeover sounds, we're going to take you look hideous and we're going to change you into a swan.
Exactly.
Whereas just let's actually work with you to make you as gorgeous as you can be.
That's
okay,
it.
I understand.
And so I did a kind of a positioning piece in my own head to make sense of it. And I've done that so many times throughout my life, definitely. It's like you're faced with a challenge and you have a choice to either see it as a sort of an absolute no-go or to reframe it as an opportunity. And I suppose that's what happened there. Anyway, I did it. It was a massive success. They got loads of letters in. People were loving the work, loving feeling heard and seen as a fuller figured woman.
And how long ago was this, actually?
That would have been 2000. It was the summer of, it was probably the winter of 2007.
Okay.
And then I remember the producer saying to me at the time, you haven't heard The Last of Us. And I was like, okay, fine. And then by the time the summer came around, they had publicly killed the show. They had announced Off the Rails isn't coming back anymore. There was huge outcry. People were horrified. And then over the summer, they decided to rethink it. And they reached out and said, would you consider presenting the show? And I was really reluctant, to be honest with you. I was like, well, I'm tipping 40. I've no huge desire to be a TV presenter. I have a really good career. I love it. I'm making, really good salary. No, why would I do that? And they pushed and they pushed and they said, no, we think, you know, you were really good on screen. We loved what you did. We loved the way that you approached the women. They felt amazing. And eventually I kind of, again, wrestled with myself, found that kind of positioning piece and thought, well, if I say no to this opportunity to host a primetime, top-rated TV show on the national broadcaster, the chances of it ever coming back round again are zero.
Yeah.
Zero. It'll never happen. And if I do it and I love it, great. If I do it and I hate it, I can walk away. And I suppose that was really a real pivotal moment for me where I realised that it's okay to feel afraid of what the consequences are and to just try anyway. And I went into the show. Myself and Brendan Courtney were match made as co-presenters. We developed a really good friendship and a chemistry. It was a huge success. We did it for 8 seasons. And all of a sudden, for the first time in my life, I had public profile. I was being recognised on the street. People loved what we did. We were rating top of the pile for trust and recognition with the audience focus groups, and RT were delighted. So that got us to a certain point. And I suppose myself and Brandon started to think, because TV is very fickle and slightly broken at the moment. But it's
a bit broken now. We won't comment.
No, but it is a tough station because you're constantly at the whim of a commissioner. Is the show going to get recommissioned? Are you going to be fronting it? Is somebody else going to be brought in ahead of you? Like, it's a very precarious world. And I'd come from freelance, so I knew what precarious looked and felt like. So myself and Brendan were thinking, well, surely there's a way that we can leverage our own profile now at this stage to do our own thing, to get out of the stable and create our own business out of this. And at that time I had just founded, I was kind of beginning to found Dress for Success at the time, as it was in Ireland. So Dress for Success is a global organisation that supports women into employment and towards economic independence by giving them the clothing and the messaging to succeed at job interviews. And so I thought that now is a way for me to further democratise what I've done with Off the Rails. So I had come from a very niche, very sort of high-end world of fashion styling. I democratised that, albeit slightly against my will, with Off the Rails to a wider audience. And I could see the value of what we did when we did those makeovers on those women, and we engaged them and we gave them the confidence to, in some cases, it's not an overstatement to say their lives changed. And we begged all the time. We said, please do a return show to show what these women have achieved after the makeovers. They left no good fiancés. They set up businesses. They left jobs they hated. They bought camper vans. They left the country. And because
I love the way you said they bought camper vans. It's so random, but that's like whatever they do.
Whatever
it's like
your
explore
happiness
the world.
is.
Yeah,
whatever your happiness is.
Because it isn't necessarily going off and having a high end career.
Not at all.
It could be hire a camper van and go traveling around Europe or
that's
whatever.
That's it. Yeah. Unlock whatever it is that makes you feel fabulous. And I saw then this nugget of confidence becoming a catalyst for real change. And because we gave those women permission to love themselves where they stood, not to defer gratification, not to defer contentment, not to defer self-love to a point in time when something happened that would allow them to.
And is this, you're saying, it wasn't a case of, you can wear this dress and you've lost 5 pounds. It's like, It's like dressing them for what they look like now 100%. So they can feel amazing in the now, which is 100%. What we should all be striving for, isn't it?
Well, any other approach is self-defeating because you have then self-appointedly placed yourself in some gratification limbo where you're not happy with what you've got. And I don't know about you, I get up out of bed in the morning, I stand on 2 legs, I walk down the stairs. That is physical privilege. And if we don't respect our bodies for where they are right now, we can't respect them into the future. And it's not fair to be that hard on ourselves. It's not fair to us to not love ourselves and our bodies, whatever they look like.
Yeah. But women are held to a much higher standard, I think, we always have been, but even like these days, just with the onslaught of everything we're bombarded with, it's, you know, you have your baby, but you should have your snapback figure, as well as, you know, breastfeeding for 2 years, cooking organic food for everyone, and holding down your career. It's just,
I see a movement that are pushing back to question that now. Like, and I think even you know, a movement towards honesty and vulnerability. I did an event recently, and one of the entrepreneurs who was on the panel burst into tears on stage and talked about how she couldn't pay her own wages this month, how she couldn't buy her kid the Cool Camp jersey to go to camp because she was in a cash flow crisis with her business. And I think that's really important that we tell those stories. And, you know, I've been there. We folded a business. Myself and Brendan had a business, got funded by $1 million. We had 17 staff in London and Dublin, and we had to make a decision that nearly killed both of us to pull the plug and say we've failed. And that's it's really important to tell those stories. I'm not sitting in this chair saying, oh, so easy, it was amazing. It wasn't. It was really hard. And by the way, it's taken 30 years. And I think we forget that it takes real tenacity to grow and to keep getting stronger, to keep getting better. And there will always be troughs along the way. It's not linear.
Yeah, you have to be like a dog with a bone, really, don't you, to
honestly,
get anywhere?
Sometimes I think that is the difference between those that really succeed and those that don't. It's just pure pig iron. You refuse to give up. You know, like it's not always the smartest.
No,
it's not always
not.
the most privileged. It's sometimes it's just the ones who refuse to fall over.
Yeah, and just keep going. Is that right? Can you just reflect a little bit on the Dress for Success? Because you know, obviously that's what you're known for an awful lot. But when you say dress women for interviews, do you give them the clothes?
So the way it works, and I think it's important to say at this stage, that we rebranded 2.5 years ago to Work Equal, because frankly, I never liked the name Dress for Success because it seems kind of frivolous. Men hate it. They're kind of allergic to it. It seems like a woman's thing. It's not a woman's thing. You know, women's equity is a societal thing. It impacts everybody, and men need to be at the table as well. So what we do for our clients is we meet them where they are, much like we did with Off the Rails. Meet them where they are, assess their needs, see what sort of role they're going for with the job interview, dress them appropriately, not as we see fit, but as they feel appropriate and empowered. So they have a session with a stylist who is a trained stylist, who will work with them to find the outfit that gives them, we call it the snap. And the snap is the minute the shoulders go back and you look in the mirror and you think, I can do this.
Yeah, okay.
And it's that, and then you know that moment of confidence has been hit. They then work with a trained HR professional to unpick the value proposition of that individual. What is it about you that is going to make you magnetic to this employer, regardless of whether you have been recently divorced, whether you've had a bereavement, whether you've been through the prison service, whether you've recently immigrated into the country, whether you're from the travelling community, whether you have had a lovely life in Mount Merion and suddenly find yourself on your own having to earn for the first time in your life. We do not judge. It's literally anybody who needs help to have the confidence to get that job can come to us. They can ring us, they can email us, walk through our door, get that service delivery and feel empowered just as much, if not more, than the next person sitting in that room.
Oh my goodness. And I'm sure you have lots of, sorry, I'm using the term success, lots of success stories.
Yeah, amazing success stories. I mean, there was an amazing woman who immigrated into Ireland 3 years ago, and she told a story of how she felt like past the parcel. Every time she went to a state service, she felt their only job was to find another room to put her in, so that she was off their books and into another room and another service provider, another agency. And somehow she found herself at Dress for Success, or Work Equal, should I say, and she expected it to be exactly the same thing, that she'd be pawned off onto somebody else. And she walked through the door. She said she walked through the door feeling worthless, and she walked out feeling like a CEO. She said she was met with kindness, respect, she was met as an equal, and she just said the whole experience was so joyful and empowering that she felt capable of anything. And that's what we do. And the clothing is all donated from corporate partners, from individuals. We have a boutique on Ellis Quay, which is stocked with the most beautiful clothes that are lightly worn. That styling session, the woman gets an outfit to wear to interview. That's hers to keep for free. All of our services are fully free. And then if she gets the job, she can come back for 3 or 4 outfits to wear as her working wardrobe until she's up to speed and earning her own money again. So our job is to deliver that cloak of confidence to anybody who needs it, fully for free.
So how do you do that then? How do you provide a free service? Tell.
Through the kindness of strangers. So we...
but even the time for the stylists are given.
Yeah.
So is that just all voluntary?
Yeah.
Okay.
So all of our stylists are volunteers and all of our HR professionals are volunteered, and they're all trained to the highest standard. We're currently getting our mentoring programme accredited as the first mentoring programme to be accredited in Ireland. We have enormous success. 58% of the women who go to interview get the job with us, compared to 18%.
That's a very high figure, isn't it?
Very high.
Do you ever get 2 in competing for the same job?
That I don't know. But there are jobs to go around, and the problem is a lot of the clients that we serve are at a disadvantage, either because they are marginalised or underrepresented. It could be issues of age or ethnicity or anything really. And so to say that we have the highest employment in the history of the state is great, but we're still missing out swathes of people who really need our support. So it's not a level playing field.
And I don't think enough people know about it either.
No.
Sure.
No, I mean, unfortunately, some of our clients say that we are Dublin's best kept secret, but we also serve all over the country as well. So we do virtual sessions as well, and we deliver clothing all over the country. And we've very exciting news launching soon. I can't say too much about it, but please, I can't give you the details. But what I will say is that we are launching a national scaling programme to get all across the island of Ireland with a physical footprint. So it's really exciting times. So we do it through funding, we do it through corporate partnership, we do it through grants and financial awards and philanthropy. And it is not easy. We're 11 years in existence now, but it feels now like we're entering a new phase where we have a fantastic strategic partner at the table who's going to help us to grow and scale. And I think the moment is now. People are coming to us, opportunities are coming to us now because we have that track record of 11 years of empowerment behind us, and success and impact and social impact. And I think for us now, it is that social mobility piece. It's not just workplace equity, can't just be about making your way to the boardroom table or to senior management. It has to be about creating pathways at every step of the pyramid.
Okay, and when you're talking about work equal, it's mainly focusing on females.
Well,
and equality within the workplace for them, or
we do serve men as well.
Okay.
So we are primarily known for serving women as being the group most in need of support because of the inequity we see. But we do have a mantra of not turning anybody away. So we have done workshops for men who need confidence to present themselves at work, and we can always find a way. We work a lot with people who have various disabilities, from intellectual disabilities to physical disabilities, and I think it's really important that we need to serve every representation of humanity in our society, or else we're not doing our job.
Yeah, I did a podcast with Jack Kavanagh. So he is a pharmacist who had a traumatic spinal injury and ended up paralysed, but he is very much about the equal opportunities and about the fact that, if 2 people go for a job, if one person is differently abled, as he calls it, versus someone that isn't, what's the likelihood of who's going to get the job? So it begs loads of questions, doesn't it?
Look, and there's another issue, which is the use of technology and the impact of technology in how we recruit and retain staff. And I know that a piece of technology was used with one firm recently to identify layoffs. And the algorithm to identify those people was based on team feedback and the regularity of team feedback. And inadvertently, women on maternity leave were identified because they had no logged team feedback because they were out of the workplace on maternity leave. And so the unknown consequences of these algorithms and how they can further prejudice against groups.
Was this noted and then they took this out of the equation, or you don't? Okay.
So and we've seen it. We've seen real issues with hidden biases in algorithms for recruitment. They're pervasive, and the good guys, the good employers, are taking note and saying we need to change this.
But sure, even with maternity leave, there are organisations, and I've spoken to people where a woman might go on maternity leave. She's in a group of a small team, say of 5. They're all, maybe depending on what age they are, but one of them goes on maternity leave, and the company doesn't recruit someone else while she's on maternity leave as cover. So a 5-man team is now 4, but doing the same work. So automatically, and this was said to me, when that woman announces she's pregnant, no one's happy because they're like,
it's terrible, isn't it?
Yeah, we know that we're going to be doing all her work for her while she's gone. And so even a woman announcing that they're pregnant in that situation isn't receiving the joy from her colleagues, because they know that in a few months' time they're going to have to pick up the slack because she's left and she's not being there. The company aren't installing another person instead of her. So it's fundamental that we get it right. But how do we start with that when a company might say, well, we can't afford to take on someone else and we're paying her maternity for her? It's messy.
I think organisations really have a responsibility to zoom out a little bit. And if you look at, the hundreds of thousands that it costs to train an individual to a relatively high level within an organisation, or not a high level, but it always costs money to train people to do their job. Are we going to create structures and systems that eject those, let's call them investments, in our business?
Yeah.
Because our people are our investment. They're our biggest investment. So are we going to create structures that eject them at critical points? Or are we going to take a holistic view and see that by creating cultures where people are valued for all the ages and stages, they will feel purposeful, they will feel valued, they will stick around, they will, keep returning on that investment through the lifetime of their employment with that company? Or are we going to take a short-termist approach and saying, well, it's not worth hanging around, it's not worth replacing that person because,
I know. Yeah. But even like women of menopausal age are the fastest growing demographic within the workplace. But yet, within I know we're talking a lot about menopause these days, but there's still many, many organisations that don't necessarily have just somewhere that women can go to talk about some symptoms that they might be feeling. They may not have a menopause policy in place where they can maybe come in late someday and work later, or even have a desk fan. Those kind of things. I think it's slowly coming around, because if women just leave the workforce because of menopausal symptoms, which they do, they're losing they're losing years of experience, aren't they?
They are. And even if you want to look at it from the other side, all these organisations where there are so many men who are in relationships with menopausal women, who are spending, a percentage of their brain power and capacity thinking about how things are falling apart at home and how they can't manage it.
Yeah.
I think as well as providing those structures and supports for women, I think we need to bring men into the conversation and say, look, this is where you come to find out if what you're experiencing is manageable, if there's anything you can do, how to navigate it. Because I think it's if we're going to be equitable about this, we have to kind of have a 360 view of it. It's not easy for anybody, and I think the society that we live in, most men are still a little bit icky about talking about women's physicality in that way. They're not really sure they're allowed. And I talk all the time about this concept of a force field of fear. So we have the incumbent majority, let's call them, in an organisation. Let's imagine that they're white men, right?
Oh, I really need to imagine
Use
that.
your imagination, right? So say that's the incumbent majority, and then the minority, the marginalised minority, are either potentially women, or they might be it might be around ethnicity, sexuality, it might be ability, it could be anything, right? So the majority kind of know this other gang have issues and challenges, but they're afraid to address them in case they cause offence or get cancelled. And the other group, who are facing the challenges, don't want to talk about them in case they're seen as whinging and weak. So nobody's talking. So actually creating safe spaces where people can be human together, open up these challenges. And I mean, I've done it. It's an exercise that I do with organisations all the time. If we're having a panel discussion with leaders, I'll say, okay, maybe 3 men and a woman. And I'll say, okay, that's fine. Before we do this panel discussion in front of your entire company, I want you all to go away and speak to 4 or 5 people who you identify as different to you. Sit down, have a cup of coffee with them, ask them about the challenges that they face. Every single time those people come back and they're like, oh my God, I had no idea. Because nobody's having these discussions. Nobody's sitting down and being human in front of another human and saying, tell me about your life experience. It's not that you're sitting down to be educated about the broader sphere of what it feels to be LGBT or anything like that. You just want to know about their experiences and the challenges and the barriers that they face. And then what that does, if you're a leader in your organisation, that arms you with a perspective that you can authentically share on behalf of somebody else. So you're not making assumptions about what's wrong. You're saying, well, I know from somebody that I spoke to that these are the barriers that they face, and I have the power within my remit to do something about it. What are we going to do about it? And again, you're back to an open conversation around creating solutions based on real life challenges.
Wow. Look, I mean, it seems so simple, but it's just not done. So, unless you come in, you come in and tell people to do it, because we tend to gravitate.
My number's 555.
Because we tend to gravitate towards people that are a bit like us.
Well, that's the problem.
Yeah,
and that's where all those kind of unconscious biases come into play. And look, you'll know that's about kind of the primal neural pathways that have been built to protect you from the unknown. You gravitate towards the known because there's less fear there. But we really need to challenge that now, and not just because it's the right thing to do, although that is the best reason, but also because it creates a much richer culture and a much richer organisational efficiency, because you're not just looking at things from one perspective. I'll give you a little story. It's one of my favourite parables, and it's true. After 9/11, a research team went in to map the culture in the CIA and to try and figure out what went wrong. Why did this primary intelligence agency not know that this attack was going to happen? Surely that's their job. What happened? And their conclusions were not complicated. They found that it was, at the time, they called it what did they call it? A homophily, which is like a singular culture of one type of individual, and that was a white, male, Ivy League educated, Anglo-Saxon, privileged person, right? So that was the majority of the culture in there. And what they said was, if there had been one single Muslim operative with the influence to be heard in that group, they would have seen the oration from the cave. And they would have said, guys, we have a problem here. This guy means business. This is a global call to arms. And instead, what the existing culture saw was a kind of a strange looking guy in raggedy clothes in a cave, spouting poetry in a language they didn't understand. So we need different perspectives in our decision making so that we can create the best solutions to everything that we do. If we make them on our own in an echo chamber, we're only fooling ourselves.
Yes. That is a great analogy, isn't it? No, it absolutely is. And so when you go into organisations and give is it mainly panel discussions that you do?
No, it's all sorts of things, really. It takes a lot of different forms. And I think, I would always see myself as sort of I've been called a friendly depth charge, or a hand grenade, somebody who can not scare the horses, go in, open up really tricky conversations without anybody feeling judged or terrified. And I think that's my role, is to open up these conversations and not leave anybody behind. Because if we win at the cost of another group, that's not winning.
Everyone has to win, isn't that right? Or everyone has to feel like as if they've been heard.
Yeah, I think so.
So are you generally called into organisations then if there is a problem, or is it just because they want to hear from you or they want a little bit of change within the organisation?
I think, going back 8 or 9 years, I was one of the first voices around the gender pay gap and saying, look, we have a real problem here. And I remember at the time, it's not that long ago, 8-9 years, at the time, I was laughed off radio stations, I was pilloried in the press, people thought I was making it up.
So they thought that you were outright lying about this pay gap?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it sounds crazy to say that now, but that was the case. They thought it was propagandist. They thought it was,
even though it was kind of like there in black and white.
There in black and white, but there was no awareness of it. So I was one of the earliest advocates to address the gender pay gap, to bring in gender pay gap reporting legislation. Ivana Bacik has to be called out as well as the first person to bring the bill.
Do you think it's a little bit because in Ireland we don't really like talking about money?
Oh,
God forbid we ask someone what their salary was. Even amongst peers, because no one, is it that you don't want someone to know what you're on, or that you don't want to?
Yeah, we're not
less?
Money confident in
we're
this
really
country.
Not. Sure
no,
we're not.
We're not, and I think it's something that we absolutely have to address. I mean, nobody is afraid to talk dollar signs, commas, and decimal points in the States. It's part of their makeup. And I think we need, and I think that's part of the importance of gender pay gap legislation, although we still have a way to go, is around mapping a landscape of earnings by sector in Ireland and seeing where we know where the holes are anecdotally, but seeing where the opportunities are as well, to make some gender segregated sectors more equal in both directions. How like my daughter who's 18 said to me, what would you say if I said I was thinking of doing an apprenticeship in bricklaying? The other day she said to me, and I said, I'd say go for it. You'll probably make a fortune. You'll be a novelty act. You'll be fit as a fiddle. And if you love it, you'll be happy. So why not?
And was she serious, or was she just moaning?
I don't know.
She's that type of 18-year-old girl, is she?
I know, she's brilliant. She's brilliant. And I think part of it is she's not sure what she wants to do.
Yeah.
So she's exploring all sorts of options to see, well, maybe I'd like that. Maybe like her brother, who's her twin, is adamantly sure what he wants to do. And so it's a tricky place to be when you leave school and you're not really sure where you're going, because we are taught there is a way to do this. You go to university, you do your masters, you get.
But that's the whole thing now. The way it's almost like a degree isn't worth the paper it's written on nowadays.
Which means it's ripe for disruption, And I have to say, Simon Harris putting the apprenticeships on the CAO platform was a genius move, because it's beginning to open up that conversation around alternative pathways, further education. How do you get to where you want to go? I didn't go, I went back in COVID and did a master's in business, equity, diversity and inclusion, which was my first foray into third level since I'd left school. So it took me possibly a little bit longer than the average bear, but that's fine. Doesn't matter. There's no prescriptive order in which you have to do this stuff. And it all has value.
But even with AI now and the internet and everything, people can learn so much just from sitting at home.
Yeah.
So and I'm not in any way saying that they don't need to go and do proper research if they're going to college, etc. But it has disrupted everything.
Yeah.
And it has put people out of jobs as well, or will put people out of jobs in the future. But then it will just create other jobs. I think that everything's just very dynamic, isn't it?
It is. And I think there are huge opportunities. There are also issues. There are definitely issues. And we need to put guardrails around the use of new technology. Can it happen fast enough to protect everybody? I doubt it. I mean, the age of the internet is so relatively new that we're still running after it. What we've created and what we think we understand already. And with the emergence of new technologies, I mean, it's going to set us even further behind the runaway train. So there's a huge amount of challenges, definitely.
Can you tell me a little bit about your 12 minutes of logic?
Yeah, well, I put that together. So that's on my website, which is SonyaLennon.com. And I put that together. So when I did the Masters, I suppose what I wanted to do was to have a kind of a primer for any leader who was interested in being convinced why they should prioritise equitable workplaces. I wanted to say, well, these are the facts. This is what it means. This is what it costs to have an absentee workforce. This is what it costs to have an unengaged workforce. This is what the benefits are of having diverse decision-making teams and leadership teams. And it's all there. It's a sort of a primer of research that can either convince you that this is the right thing to do or help you to convince a leader that this is the right thing to do. So a lot of HR professionals, I think because of the nature of the work that I do, are aware of what I'm doing and are using that as almost a sort of a, look, here are the reasons why this is non-negotiable. And also with new EU directives coming through very soon, there is going to be such a sort of a disclosure in terms of everything that we do. I mean, one of the things that we're going to be doing with Work Equal now is to lobby the government to create legislation around social mobility policies, because customers, clients, stakeholders, they know that this is the right thing to do. They know that it's not okay to only invite people who look like you, sound like you, smell like you to the table. We have to invite difference to the table. And unless we wrap that in a policy so that we can map it and track it, it won't happen.
As opposed to just being a box ticking exercise, let's get someone that looks a little bit different to us in the door, so therefore we've ticked that box.
Yeah, and I think that's so we talk a lot about the sort of arc of maturity of an organisation. So are you at the beginning where you don't even see that there's an issue and you don't think you should be part of it? Have you awoken your awareness where you see, oh, we might have a little challenge here? Or are you at the kind of, we must comply? Or have you moved beyond that into, actually, we really see the business benefits of this? Or have you moved beyond that again into, we have a corporate social justice responsibility to be the best version of ourselves within our community? And that's kind of the holy grail, that you see how the work that you do as an organisation can flow with positive impact into the community. And all of those different stages, none of them are obviously you want to be heading in this direction, but I think what we're really encouraging organisations to do is to say, own where you are. You can't get better without owning where you are. It's a little bit back to the off the rails methodology now that I think about it. You know, if you realise...
You're just coming full circle.
Listen, it's beautiful. But it is a bit like, okay, if you realise that you're in a male-dominated sector and you have no strategy to build a pipeline for women into your organisation at any level, let's talk about that. Let's put your hand in the air and say, you know, due to legacy issues, this is where we find ourselves. This is what we're going to do about it. Nobody gets better until they own their own position and then builds a strategy and an action plan to move on.
Have you heard any people or rumblings from people saying, oh yeah, there's women being appointed to the board, but they're just being appointed to the board because the board has to appoint women and they're not necessarily the best qualified for the job, and people giving out about that?
I haven't heard, so I've heard a version of that. There are so many good women and men out there, I've rarely heard anybody say, if ever, she is not good, she's just a tick box. I've heard people saying, you know, she was only hired because she's a woman.
Yeah.
I've never heard anybody back it up and say, but she's shit.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because there's loads of good candidates out there, right? So I think that the bigger issue is where organisations see the board as the solution to their problems, whereas actually, if you think of an organisation as a pyramid, that representation needs to be addressed at every level. So, and one of the issues with gender pay gap reporting is, say you have a massive initiative to bring people in at the bottom, for example. Say you're a construction company and you decide to launch a female-focused apprenticeship, right, for construction workers. You're bringing people in at the bottom, hopefully loads of them, and that might adversely affect your gender pay gap because they're at the lowest salary.
Yeah, okay.
So it's a really nuanced issue, but if you have a rationale for that, the public will accept it. It's all about how do you communicate what you're doing? So if you communicate and you say, we're about to launch this massive apprenticeship program, it's actually going to set us back in terms of the figures in the short term, but it's going to move us so far forward in the medium term. And I think it's just to understand the impact of your actions as an organisation as you move towards an equitable workplace. But I think it's the entry level, it's the mid-level. Loads of women fall out at mid-level, as you've already said. And so what do we do to create structures and systems at that point to protect our biggest investment? How do we keep them in the job? Do we create maternity policy? Do we have maternity buddies? Do we have an opt-in for a communication system during maternity? I don't think any woman, if she loves her job and values her career, wants to be completely disassociated from it while she's on maternity leave. She wants time, she wants space, but she wants to know what's going on. So do we have an opt-in where you say, I'm going to do every fortnightly, I'm going to have a half-hour call with my team to say, tell me what's happening, keep me esprit. Because actually one of the biggest issues when you come back from maternity leave is that you kind of feel like you don't belong. You feel like you have been left behind. So maybe there's another way to do it. And maybe some of the assumptions that we make about women and what they need aren't even right.
My goodness, you're so right there, because I had 3 maternity leaves. I'm a pharmacist, and so I went away for a year for my first fella, 9 months for my second, and the third fella we were broke, so I just took the 6 months with him. But each time I felt I went back to work to a completely different organisation, because maybe some things were changed. And then obviously with the HSE there's always different things kind of coming on stream, so even with just drug schemes, etc. But if I had been, like you said, even just able to watch a little video on things that had changed once a month, even, you wouldn't have felt so on the back foot when you went back.
And I think these are tough questions, because I'm sure there's people listening to that saying, no, I don't want to hear a thing. Yeah. I'm up to my oxters in nappies. I don't want to know. And that's fine. And that's why I'm saying it's an opt-in.
Yeah. But then with an opt-in, will someone think, oh God, if I don't opt in, do they think that I'm worse than Jemima who opted into everything? So there's that piece too. It's quite complicated, isn't it?
It is. And I mean, we're seeing the same thing with paternity leave, where the take up is so low, where it's there and companies are saying come and get it, and men aren't taking it because they see it as regressive to their career path. It's like, lads, we know. So it's and I think a bit like the technology, we haven't got all this figured out, and so that's why with the work that I do, we go on study tours. We came back from Iceland recently. We're planning a trip to Norway. We want to know how the most equal countries in the world do it. What are the big levers for change? What's making a fundamental difference to their societies? And how can we then create a bespoke jigsaw puzzle for Ireland that helps us to be agile and to be among the best in the world, because we have that capacity. We're small enough, we're fast enough, we can do it. And in fact, Ivana Bacik, who I mentioned already, was the chair of the Joint Oireachtas Committee following on from the the Citizens Assembly on Gender Equality, and they published an extraordinary document called Unfinished Democracy, which outlines a bold, brave and sweeping plan for an equitable Ireland. And it is, part of my job is holding the government to account to make sure that they follow the time-bound action plan to make all this happen. Because if we can get that going, we already have the Citizens Assembly saying this is what we need to do. Here are the 47 recommendations to make Ireland a more equal place for everybody. So we know what we're doing. We just have to push to make it happen.
Okay, so you said two things there that struck me. Time-bound and push. So how does it actually work in reality? Because you hear, even like completely separate, you hear about, families having to fight for the most basic care for their special needs kids. Years and years and years of fighting to try and get something over the line. So how do we ensure that the equality that you're asking for, that we need, happens in a timely fashion? How is it done?
So it's hard work and it's constant lobbying, and Work Equal co-founded the Oireachtas cross-party group on workplace equity, and that meets regularly with cross-party members to push. And it's a bit like eating the elephant, you kind of have to focus on one bit, get that over the line, focus on another bit, get that over the line. But I think, as I said, the Unfinished Democracy is a real blueprint for change, so that needs constant monitoring to make sure that, and also, like, I have a real problem with party politics in that it is the enemy of the national strategy sometimes, so we have revolving door of ministers, we have different agendas at play, so everything needs to live in the national strategy space. It can't be owned by a party or it can't be owned by an individual, so it's complex, and you're lobbying individuals knowing that those individuals are not going to stick around, so yeah.
And it's about having that continuity as well then. So I'd say you're very good at kind of fighting, are you?
I'm a good scrapper.
I would love
The only thing is I'll scrap with you. You won't know I've scrapped with you until I've left the room.
I can imagine. Because you kind of have this air about you that, you're very convincing. And it's like, she's gone. I was like, did she just have one over on me there? I love it.
You're getting the sense of it.
I absolutely am. But we're 56 minutes in and I know you have to go.
Oh.
So I wanted to ask you my last two questions, and I think we'll get you back on. Maybe we'll see, put it out there.
Sure.
What people want to know more about as
Sure.
well, actually. That'll be good. So my last two questions that I ask everyone on the podcast are, first of all, what advice would you give young people today?
I think it comes down to not caring what other people think. And certainly that was a real penny drop moment for me when I realised that nobody really has the capacity to care about me. They're too busy caring about themselves. And that there is a great freedom in that. It sounds harsh and it sounds cold, but it's not about that. It's actually a liberation that allows you to do things without fear of judgment. And I think it, isn't it in that famous book, the one written by the hospice nurse who asked all of her patients when they were dying I think it's called The 5 Regrets of the Dying, and one of them was, I wish I hadn't cared what other people thought. And I can really see that, and it's very empowering. It's very empowering not to care what other people think of you.
It is, and unfortunately it's probably in and around your 40s that you really start to feel that way, when it should be your 20s that you start to feel that way.
Totally. And I think that's why I picked it, because there's loads of things that there's loads of things that I wish I could tell people in their teens and their 20s. But I think that's the one, if you can just plant it somewhere in your brain that you're ready to take it at the soonest opportunity, it is definitely the one that makes a big difference.
And Sonya Lennon, what is the meaning of life?
Oh, I think for me it is two things, and I think it is only fair on me to say that you did send me these questions in advance. This just doesn't roll off my tongue. I did have to think about it, but I did think about it, and I actually think about it a lot. It's two things. It's a passion to try and leave even a small part of the world a little bit better than you found it. in any way, shape or form. Doesn't matter what it is. And you have to find that thing that you're passionate about in order to do that. It has to matter to you. And the second thing is just to just lean into right now and just enjoy it. No point waiting. Absolutely no point waiting. So whether that's running into the sea with a couple of mates, whether it's having a lovely meal and a glass of wine, whatever it is, having a laugh, listen to a song, whatever it is, find moments that give you joy right now and just sit on them.
I've seen a few pictures of you in the sea with your mates and it looks like great crack.
It is.
I might have to join you. Sonya, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Laura.